Hey, Peter.
Hey, Jeremy. Good morning.
Good morning, and welcome to all the folks listening. It's great to have our very select few group of listeners who join us. I've been amazed actually at who some of you are who've reached out to me about the show and asked me questions and so on. So it's never the classic folks that I thought it was. But yeah, welcome. This is really just a simple show. We record it live between Peter and myself so that we don't have a lot of work to edit and do everything. And we try and do it all in real time. Though we don't really tend, we've chosen a slot that doesn't work for most people, in Monday mornings. But the show is really just a chance for Peter and I to catch up and to break down a little bit. Each of us have a newsletter, and it's really a chance for us to break down a little bit more live in a live context what we've written about in the past week. And we also touch on topics like things that are going on in the world, typically tech, and focusing in on the tech world. And so that's it. That's what we do. The format of the show will probably go into some news first, and then we'll go into each of our blog posts. There's chapters, so feel free to skip around. You don't have to watch
Yeah.
the whole thing. Sometimes these things can get long, so don't feel like you have to watch the whole thing at all.
And maybe just to add, we have a lot of experience as engineering leaders, and our
Mm.
target audience who we think that this can be very useful to watch is those people who are trying at engineering management, have some experience, or trying to get into this path. And yeah, this is why you said the chapters are going to be useful. If there is a topic that you're struggling with or curious about, then just feel free to jump there and watch it.
Exactly. Yeah, and we're still figuring all of that out. So
Oh yeah,
feedback is
important point. Yeah.
super important.
We like to experiment. We like to
Yeah,
experiment live. So
probably
bear
we'll
with
hit
us.
our stride in the 100th episode or something like that.
I don't think it's ever gonna be done.
We'll see.
Yeah.
But yeah, Peter, there's a lot of news going on at the world on the moment, and I know that you're deeply into politics.
Oh yeah.
And you look like you were up all night.
I went to bed around 4 a.m. We're recording this on the 10th of June. If you're catching up late, this is the day after the EU elections, and coincidentally in Hungary we have also local elections for the local governments, mayors. It was a big evening. We gathered with a few friends of mine and were watching together, reloading the election pages. For the mayor of Budapest, the competition was crazy. At one point where they already counted like a 250,000 votes, the difference between the two headliners, the two first, were 19 votes. It's mind-blowing. I think it's a good example for those people who say that I'm not going to go to vote because my vote doesn't count. I actually heard a good explanation. I don't remember where. The person said that voting is like a lottery ticket. If you go voting, it's like buying a lottery ticket. Yes, most of the time your single ticket is not going to matter much, but you still have a chance to make a huge difference if you end up winning the lottery. And yesterday evening we had some winnings, we had some losings. Interesting news in France also.
Not a great result. The results weren't so great here with the extreme right winning, and then we'll see where things go. The politics in France is going to go crazy now with new elections being called. Just, great timing with the Olympics and everything else.
Wow.
So it's going to be interesting. I like your point about voting. I have to say, living in a foreign country, I've voted less, but it was something that I really cared about since I could vote. So yeah,
I think this is an important thing, and I don't want this to be a politics show or civic duty show. There are still, unfortunately, a lot of countries on earth where people would be very grateful if they would have the right to vote and that their vote would count as much as our votes count, and the very little that we perceive. So I think we owe it to them also to keep this democratic tradition alive and participate as much as we can.
One of the things that Peter does every week is Peter actually shares two posts. One is more like an article or something, and the other is kind of like an update of what Peter got up to this week. And there was something really cool that Peter shared in this week's newsletter, which was, I don't know if you want to introduce this little video, and we thought we'd play it for you.
Happily.
Actually.
Yeah, it's Angelo Badalamenti explaining how he created the famous soundtrack for the Twin Peaks TV series, working together with David Lynch, the director of the series. This is a very short clip, like 4 or 5 minutes, and we're going to try to play it. I don't know, for some reason I saw it years ago, and I really liked it because I think the soundtrack, it's very emotional. It captures really well a certain mood. It has very good progression. You're probably familiar with the Laura's Theme, the song I'm talking about. But this was the first time when I was watching it, and I made an experiment to try to watch it with an engineering manager point of view, and trying to find interesting inspiration or values or ideas from it. So I think we should play the clip if we can do that, and
Yep.
and then maybe we can discuss some of the stuff that we saw and the analog I made.
Let's see. Let's go for it.
This is the keyboard that all the major themes were created for Twin Peaks. It's an old Fender Rhodes and kind of beat up. And David would sit right over here, right to the right of me, and we would put a little cassette just about over here on this keyboard, just keep it in record and just keep it playing. David would sit here and I'd say, well, what do you see, David? What is, just talk to me. And David would say, okay, Angelo, we're in a dark woods now. And there's a soft wind blowing through some sycamore trees. And there's a moon out, and there's some animal sounds in the background. And you can hear the hoot of an owl, and you're in the dark woods. You know, just get me into that beautiful darkness with the soft wind. And I started playing. And David would say, Angelo, that's great. I love that. That's a good mood. But can you play it slower? And I'd say, slower, David? Okay. And I'd go. He says, that's it. That's a good tempo. Just keep it going slow like that. Just keep that going for a while. And in David's mind, you can just see that he was visualizing the description that he envisioned. Then he would say, okay, Angelo, now we got to make a change, because from behind a tree in the back of the woods, there's this very lonely girl. Her name is Laura Palmer, and it's very sad, but get something that matches her. And I just segued into this. And he'd say, well, that's it. It's very beautiful. I could see her. And she's walking towards the camera, and she's coming closer. Just keep building it. Just keep building it. And she's getting close. Now reach some kind of climax. And I would go, and he said, oh, that's it. Oh, that's so beautiful. Angelo, oh, that's tearing my heart out. I love that. Just keep that going. Now she's starting to leave. So fall down. Keep falling. Keep falling. Keep falling. Now go back into the dark woods. That's it. Keep going. Just keep it going. Very quiet and mysterious. David got up, gave me a big hug. He said, Angelo, that's Twin Peaks. I said, okay, David, I'll go home and I'll work on it. He said, Angelo, don't do a thing and don't change a signal note. I see Twin Peaks. And that's how it was done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah, it is very powerful, I think. And I don't know, did you watch the series or did you?
It's been on my list to watch.
Because it's hard to think about this without remembering the series and everything. I was very young when it was on TV, and I was, I don't know, late teenager, early teenager, something like this. So it had a big effect on me, and the music, I think it's very powerful and very beautiful. So, but the reason I included it in an engineering leadership newsletter is that after rewatching this, I realized that the feeling that Angelo Badalamenti is conveying, it's something familiar, and it's this shared creativity, shared flow state of pair programming when it's working well, when two people are inspiring each other, solving a problem together, and getting more and more excited, and everything just, this theory of flow state, and I think that's it that you
Yeah.
described. So I was trying to make a thought experiment about what else can I identify here that's a bit similar, that doesn't stretch the analogy too much. And yeah, I was thinking about keeping this feedback loop very short, like as David Lynch is immediately reacting to what he's hearing and saying that, okay, now change this a little bit, now she's moving away, and they're interacting very fast and adapting what's working very fast. It's very interesting that the roles they were playing, like David Lynch was really instructor. Nothing he was doing could have been done without Angelo Badalamenti collaborating and creating things that he can reply to and reflect to. So I think that's also a good analogy when we do pair programming and one person is, the pilot or driving the whole thing with the keyboard and typing, and the other one is making comments. I think it's a very similar setup. And finally, just last thing that I really like, the twist of the story is that they were recording the whole stuff, and David Lynch was saying, no, don't take it away and fine tune it and perfect anything. This is it, like the result of this collaboration, what's on the tape, that's the result, that's what we should ship. And I think we can resonate to that a lot as engineers.
I think it's a fantastic analogy for pairing from another domain. And
That's nice. Yeah.
I think pairing is one of the most powerful things that we can do. I'm not probably a purist who thinks that people need to pair all the time, but I have very rarely seen an organization where people pair enough. And the majority of the time, what I've seen is actually a hesitancy to pair, and also mob programming, the similar kind of
Yes.
approach, but where you have a whole group. It could also be like I saw people in the US wanting to do it more, and I also saw people in the UK wanting to do it more. But I definitely seen, certainly here in France, in the last few jobs I've been in tech companies here, much more of a resistance.
Why do you think? Why the resistance, and what are the reasons why companies and teams don't pair work as much as they should?
I think like a lot of things that work really well, it's counterintuitive. Going back to, I talk a lot about theory X and theory Y, and this idea that Taylorism, which is where you have some really smart people who decide how everything should work in a factory, that's probably the most optimal way to do it. That's the classical mindset way of thinking. Whereas the theory Y is actually, you need to find a way to release the creativity of people so that they can solve those problems and turn the ship around. And David Marquet talks about moving decision-making to the individuals and creating leaders everywhere and leading through intent. And I think that pair programming and mob programming is kind of counterintuitive in the same way from a few aspects. Well, two people doing one job together has to be less productive.
Yeah, what a waste of time.
And this idea that even in some people who do it, they get frustrated, they feel like they're going slower and so on. I think there's also this fear of making mistakes in front of someone.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Also, the impostor syndrome that can really be scary, and that's why it's important to have healthy organizations. If there is no safe space to fail, if there is fear of just being ridiculed or any retributions, then it's not ideal for pair programming.
Yeah, like you're a coder who okay, now people are using ChatGPT, but like you're a coder who's maybe used to look like in the we used to Google or search
Mhm.
for something. Oh, I'm not quite sure. I'm going to search for it. That's part of your workflow, right? And it's totally normal. Right now, it would be maybe using Copilot or using ChatGPT or something like that, and you're using an LM as part of your workflow, and to show someone that in a pairing context that you do that.
Yeah, but if you think about it, that's a very individualistic feeling, no? Like I'm supposed to know all this shit, how the print function is called this week. That's the classic C++
It comes from our
joke.
education.
Yeah, yeah. But
Education
but but
teaches you to
I'm
learn this. Yeah.
European education, maybe that's the difference between US and
Yeah.
some European cultural.
Yeah, I think so. And
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
so I do think that one of the superpowers that, there's going to be a few superpowers that separate people, but in the world that we're already in and that we're moving even more into, collaboration is a skill and a strength that distinguishes your ability to make things and do things.
Yeah.
And I think that's collaboration with human beings. I do also think it's collaboration with, I hate to say it because there's some bad aspects to this, but collaboration with AI. And
That's
you
a
need,
differentiating skill,
yeah, yeah,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. And just like before, it was searching, how do I use like an advanced search in Google to get what I want? But now
Yeah.
it's when should I use the AI? How do I use
Yeah.
it?
It's even more like I feel more parallels with the pair programming
Mhm.
aspect.
Yeah.
At least this is the way I'm using ChatGPT. It's very conversational.
Mm.
I get inspiration, or I even inspire the
Yeah.
LLM to come up with something, and we help each other out.
Exactly. The other thing that's counterintuitive is I think that people think that pair programming is to teach other like junior people to learn.
Hmm.
Whereas I actually don't think that pairing
No.
is best for that. I think pairing is best for building things, making stuff where it's like that, just like in the video clip we showed, there's two people bouncing off each other, like vibing off each other in a state of flow. It's amazing. And I think pairing is really powerful for building it. Actually, for learning, I think the best is mobbing where you're all kind of surrounding, and then someone who is actually, like maybe one of the junior people in the team is actually driving the keyboard, and you're having like a bit of coaching and going
Yeah.
around, but the whole group is learning together. I think is actually a more powerful approach. Though obviously when you have a more senior and more junior person pairing, that can also work.
I would say that's a tool to use in a
Mm.
mentorship situation to do something
Mhm.
together. The whole setup and the whole goals are very
Mm.
different. The goal
Mm.
is learning and not
Mm.
solving something. While as in traditional pair programming or
Mm.
mob programming, I think the goal is to solve a problem together. Another good analogy for this can be the escape rooms in Hungary. They are very popular now, or
Mhm.
since a few years. That's a perfect analogy for mob programming. There are
Mhm.
a group of people trying to solve together a problem. Everybody's helping out, throwing, bouncing off ideas. Sometimes somebody goes off a bit,
Mhm.
explores something, comes back to the group. It's a very
Mhm.
similar mindset and shows the power of group thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, because for me, the mobbing is where you need something that needs to be disseminated across the whole group
Mhm.
and cross-skilled. Like, so for example, um, one thing that's really powerful is where you have a team that has maybe say front end and back end, but it can be where you actually go through and maybe have like solve a back end or build an end-to-end feature with front end and back, and then you disseminate the skill of the front end bit or the understanding of how the front end bit works to the back end and vice versa. And then you have a team that becomes more cross skilled in each other's, and what you really want is to be able to have like a good understanding of each side in that as well.
Yeah.
One thing about beautiful thing about pair programming is having a front end and back end person pairing, building a feature like together, or having a designer, and maybe a designer and a front end person, but really pairing to build. That's the power of pairing. You're writing a document. I've worked on some stuff where I've been working with a product person on an idea about something, and we sit down and we actually build it together. And then sometimes we've gone back, we've separated out a bit, gone into our own bits and then gone back. But just that moment of that pairing is very, very powerful.
I agree. Do you think, last question on this, and then we can move on from the topic, but I think it's a valuable discussion. How do you think it translates to distributed teams?
Well, the amazing thing about technology is it's really easy to do distributed.
When it's
You know,
shared, those are two
it's
goes on.
ironically probably even potentially better
Yeah.
in some sense. There is an aspect of sitting on someone's shoulder as well in an
Mm,
office, having one keyboard and mouse
yeah.
and passing it between you. That's kind of it's quite natural too. But technology has really come along in this aspect. So in sense, it can be better almost remote.
Mhm.
Um,
I think, yeah, maybe I'm jumping to conclusions, but I would draw the line like if it's a new team, if there is not a very solid level of
mhm,
trust, then I think in-person pair programming has a better chance for
mhm,
success because you're not just working on a problem, but you're implicitly building trust also and picking up on
mhm,
very little non-verbal communication nuances if
mhm,
somebody likes an idea or not. These things don't translate so well to online communication.
mhm,
But once there's a healthy team that
mhm.
know each other and work each other well, I agree that online can be even more efficient.
Yeah, because I mean, if you have that case where people don't know each other well, then the number one thing that you need to do is build that trust in the team. And
Yeah,
even if people are remote, you've got to get them in person.
yeah,
And it takes way, way, way longer when you're distributed to build that level of trust that you
yeah.
can have over having a lunch together, walking to a restaurant near the office, talking randomly with one of the other person in the team,
So true.
sitting around a table, walking back, having a coffee in the office, and then the workshops that you would do. And by the way, one of the things you can then do is when you've got the team together is do some of this, like, and maybe even pick topics that the team are trying to solve right now, or do like a mini hackathon type thing and do like
Yeah,
mini
hackathons are
topics.
great for this.
Mm,
Hackathons are great because they really level the playing field. It doesn't
mhm,
matter if somebody's at the company since 10 years or just joined, or if
mhm.
somebody's a very expert in one stack, someone in another one. On a hackathon, everyone is a little bit equal and can bring different stuff to the team. Yeah.
Exactly. So, Peter, thank you for bringing this video to, and
My pleasure. Glad to
I,
like it.
when I worked at Red Hat's Open Innovation Labs, we collected a little library of videos, and I think you've seen me play one or two.
I remember when
Yeah,
we first met and you were playing one by one, and I'm like, oh my God, that's mind blowing. I love that video.
this is going in my list of my playlist for
Wow.
of
Okay.
videos.
Maybe actually a good
Yeah.
exercise for managers also is like pose it as a question, like how would you describe the mood? Does it bring any analogy? And then just start the discussion about pair programming.
Actually, yeah, this video is a great icebreaker. You could play in a team meeting or
Yeah.
whatever and have a discussion about it and so on. I think it can bring a lot of stuff. If you're seeing like either not a lot of pairing or whatever, I think it could be really cool.
Yeah. Maybe an icebreaker on offsite first day
Yeah,
and then set the tone.
yeah. Well, my favorite icebreakers are still the terrible Terry Tate. You know,
Which
like,
one?
well, so so just basically what I do is I love to have a video at the beginning of a meeting. You know how people come in late and stuff. So I like to feel like if I like to,
Shame on them. Yeah.
yeah. But what I like to do is I like to hit play at the start time of the meeting, but you give like a couple of minutes for late runners to arrive, but play something funny that means you're not repeating yourself or whatever. And then at the end, you just kind of go into the meeting, but you just have that little buffer.
We can put it to the show notes.
Put it in the show notes, but basically, terrible Terry Tate. It's what's his name? He's Terry something, but he's in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he's an American football player. Basically,
Yeah,
he's an
yeah.
office linebacker. So what happens is whenever anyone breaks a rule in the office, he's tackling them and knocking them over, and then shouting at them saying, you're not allowed to do this." And it's kind of funny. It's funny little videos like that are great little intros to meetings that make people
Yeah.
laugh. I love exactly like that. Just fantastic
Yeah.
way to
I like that because it signals that something has started. You better bring your focus in. It also brings the people together. And to your point, it gives latecomers a chance to join and not miss anything.
exactly. Yeah. It's less threatening.
Yeah. All right, shut the door. It's 10 o'clock. We're starting now.
Well, moving on, one of the other thing then you wrote about this week, Peter, and sticking with what you've written, I love your 10 takeaways from the 10th CraftCon conference. Let me just share the screen. By the way, I'm looking forward to the Hungarian article that you're going to write.
Yeah. Yeah. I did it in the hands of some editors who are much more experienced than I am.
So I'm looking forward to the translated version of that.
People to the rescue.
Yeah, I loved it. And thank you for sharing this because I think it captures a moment and a snapshot of kind of where people are thinking. And one of the things that stood out for me, and it's been a theme, for even in our conversations, and the theme in Gergely's newsletter, Pragmatic Engineer. And I don't know, maybe you can talk through this what's
Okay.
old is new again. I'd love, just if you to share, and we can talk.
Yeah,
a little
let's
bit about it.
discuss, because I think it's an interesting thought. Because what we are seeing now in the industry in 2024 is, late 23, is that what seems like a shocking sudden change of the climate in the tech market, job market, and everything. Suddenly, people who were in a big interest, software developers, engineering managers, they're struggling to find jobs. Companies are doing layoffs. Those companies who have record profits, those companies who very rarely in their history did layoffs ever, are doing round after round of layoffs, and it's hard to wrap our head around what the hell is going on. So one of the main points of Gergely Oros's talk, he had the opening keynote, was that it's actually not something new what we're experiencing. It's actually more like a return to normal or return to usual. Of course, there is some overcorrection and some extremes, but his main point is that we were living through 15 years of 0% interest rate. And that's almost unprecedented. I'm talking about American history, but tech is about the US market, and it has a lot of impacts on European and the rest of the world. So the 0% interest rate meant that every investor, and it's not just VCs, it's also pension funds who are handling a lot of money. In order to have some return on your money, you need to take bigger risks, because if you do the safe investment, just buy some state bonds, then you're losing your money because inflation is eating it. There is 0% interest rate. On some markets, I remember in the some European banks, Germany, they were giving negative interest rates for keeping your money, which was mind-blowing to live through. And this phenomena, combined with the fact that at the beginning of these 15 years, there were a lot of radical innovations. He singled out two things. The mobile platforms, iOS and Android, were starting in more or less in the beginning of this era. And the other one was cloud computing. So if you put this together, a lot of radical new ideas, platforms, and everything that can open up a lot of possibilities. And on the other hand, you have a lot of money that's looking for risky investments, tech startups and everything. You get the perfect combination that resulted in you also the salaries of US software engineers and everything, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 per year. That period is over now. The interest rate is at, I don't know, 2, 3, 4%. I don't remember where we are now. Meaning that all these investors, they can say that, okay, I don't care about these startups. I just put my money back to the state bonds and I'm going to get my 4%. That's good enough for me. Zero risk. This is why companies are doing layoffs. This is why companies are very careful. This is why startups who are not profitable are in very deep shit now, because they suddenly have a very short runway and they have almost zero chance to do another round of funding unless they are doing something with AI, which
I was literally just going to say that. So basically, AI and all of this, suddenly there's a new bubble still, it's AI, and
it's
they're
crazy.
getting billions.
Yeah. They're getting most of them. But if a password manager is looking at ways to utilize it, that shows that maybe AI is not the like it's not very fundamental development on everything that has the AI label. I mean, no offense to our ex-colleagues at Dashlane, and there were a lot of very interesting experiments with AI and large language models about how we identified login forms and everything. That's super cool. But you have to admit that there are a lot of companies who are doing AI just to be able to go to their board saying that, yes, we are investing in AI and doing this and that.
Yeah, and I think certainly I've been through 2 of these bubbles bursting in my career, possibly 3 actually, because I graduated in the middle of one.
Well, not 3. Let's just go, or let me just say what you think.
I graduated in 2002.
I started to work in 98, so and actually at an ISP, so I saw it going up and down. It was a crazy ride. 2008.
Now. And graduating, like I remember graduating and there were no jobs. There were very few, and you had to go to job fairs, and it was really like, hard. And I was wondering, what am I going to do? And had a friend who started at Accenture, graduated, he did an internship, so he already had a leg in, and I think he had like 500 people applying for every one job or
Yeah.
something, and it was crazy. And I felt so lucky when I got a job. I felt so happy about
Yeah.
it. Just was so relieved.
Yeah.
And it was like not so far from home. You know, we talked about my commute on my motorbike and stuff, but
Yeah.
the initial
Yeah,
commute was,
but this is a
yeah.
very good point. Like one of the small points was making, because then his talk was about, okay, what can you do to survive in this climate? And one of the points he was making is not the major points, but one of them is that this happened before. Like this is very similar to the early 2000s .com burst. So yeah, dig into those stories, see what people were doing there, and also get some hope that this is going to be over. Like it's we overcorrecting now, but things are going to get back to normal like they always do. And it's gonna
so my question for you on this, and I think it's what I wanted to tie in here, was you're writing a series about getting hired as an engineering manager. So think about both ICs and engineering managers. Let's brainstorm what are the things that people can do to kind of future-proof themselves a little bit, or to give themselves options.
Yeah.
Mostly you've been writing about like the hiring search, job search process and everything else, but career-wise, what are the things that people can do to kind of give themselves more options?
This it's going to be easy to answer because I'm gonna quote Gary Oros. He was addressing these questions, and one of the first things that he was saying is actually tying well to what you just said about career, focusing on career security instead of job security. Like those companies like Google used to be famous for this. Like you get hired at Google, you can stay as long as you want because Google never lays people off, and you will work with very smart people, very inspiring job, etc. That doesn't exist anymore. You should focus on career security. And what he means is that, for example, try to move from cost centers to profit centers. The difference between cost centers and profit centers is that your work, does it contribute to actually the bottom line on the company? Does it bring in money to the company, or it's a helping function? Like, are you working at a company where tech is secondary and you're responsible for the website of the company, for example? Then you're a cost center. If you're working at a SaaS company developing the product that the company is selling, you're working at a profit center.
Yeah,
those jobs are safer.
If you're just doing IT and you're part of the IT team, maybe we can cut someone in that team, etc. Whereas if you're building a core feature that the company needs for the future, then probably safer.
Sorry, no.
Tesla, you know, this funny story of Tesla laying off all the people who were building the superchargers.
That was crazy. I had it in the newsletter.
And I was thinking about that. I mean, because there was a politics and stuff in there, but they maybe were a cost center to the company. They already have the best network,
That's
right?
a good point. Yeah, I don't know the Tesla strategy, and arguably not everything that's coming out of the mind of Elon Musk is genius. So maybe they're wrong on this. But I can imagine that they were thinking, okay, we need a charger network to convince people that a fully electric car is a valuable option. But now they have it. Yeah. So maybe it was just a means to an end.
Every other car manufacturer in America is changing their carport to the Tesla carport, which is in the US, it's not a standard. Whereas I think in Europe, there is a standard, but in America, it's the other way around. Tesla, they have the best network, but they have a non-standard port. And now all the car manufacturers are switching to theirs. Yeah, they already won, you know?
Yeah, exactly. They don't need it. It was just crazy how it happened, because the story was that the head of this department already executed a sizable layoff, if I remember well. And she went into a meeting with Elon discussing, Elon was saying further reductions. And she was saying, I cannot do this without compromising our goals or roadmap and everything. And then he just made a snap decision to just, I can see the light bulb going up in his head saying that I don't even need this. Like, why am I sitting here? Why are we discussing this? I don't need a charger network anymore. I needed that 5 years ago to convince people. Now people are convinced. We cannot fabricate enough cars to sell them. It was a means to an end.
So he got rid of this executive and their entire team.
Exactly. Get back to the
career security.
Career security, profit centers versus cost centers. The third one is, he was using the expression do more stacks. Obviously, for software engineers, it's about being full stack. Like if you're a backend developer, work on the front end a bit, understand it. But it's not just that, it's about functions also. Like embrace this wall shift left movement that's happening in the industry, where we are saying that quality, security, these kind of questions should be asked earlier in the software development lifecycle. Developers should actually be responsible for the quality of their code, for the security. They should be responsible for deployments. So when he's saying do more stacks, he means, do some QA, do some DevOps, do even some project management that can really make a difference between two developers if one can manage their works better and the other cannot. Do you have any comments on this? Because that was another one.
As a CTO, the one thing I would say is I find it super irritating when you have a small group of people who are like, say, backend people who say, I don't want to know about the business.
Understand the business and understand that your job is to make money.
But understand the user and be passionate about who's using it. Know not just the business, understand the industry of what you're doing. And frankly, if I see that I've got some people with a very close mindset in a team that doesn't really work well across the organization, they're really mono-skilled, whereas I have other people who have a really positive mindset who are focused on the customer, and I think to myself, that team, I could get rid of most of them and put the writing on the wall for them, and I could have other people that cross-skill into their area. I will have a better solution for everybody because I'll have a group of people that are more passionate about the end user. And I know that people can learn that back-end stuff. And,
everything is learnable.
So I think if you have a very fixed, closed mindset, and that's why your multiple stacks and everything, it's just painting yourself in a corner that now, there's always going to be niches that you will find. It might be that there's still mainframe people out there who, and all the rest. So there's niches there, but don't bet on it. It's really like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Career security is embracing that change is happening and being open to it and learning about all the new stuff. And arguably, it's much easier now. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you really had this strong separation between front end and back end on web programming. And when mobile started to pick up, that was unquestionably a different platform. Today, arguably you can do everything in JavaScript, or you can do Kotlin, and you can do mobile and backend and everything in Kotlin. The tools are much more robust now to be able to
you can have a front end in JavaScript and write React backend and have the same language. You can
or TypeScript and And what I wanted to say is that when I started out my career, web developers by definition were full stack. We didn't have this separation. Like if you wanted to develop web, you needed to know HTML, you needed to know JavaScript, you needed to know CGI Perl or something like this.
There's going to be strong words and stuff, but like I remember I did Java J2ME, it's legacy now, but like I was Java dev, wrote that. With Java, you were writing front end, and sometimes the frameworks and stuff are horrible, but you were kind of full stack. But it was also, you were a hacker and you just applied your knowledge to wherever and you learned new concepts. I think it's really sad when people paint themselves into a very limited, these are the only things I do now or whatever. And yeah, it's sad. I mean, I guess it's the number of people who code has grown. It's not just for the people who did it because they were super passionate. It's a job. You know what I mean? It's like a 9 to 5. In my opinion, the people who treat it only like that, I think I would rather reward the people who really put more of their passion into it. And I think they're going to be the ones that skip forward to the new technology, that do the exciting stuff. Choose where you want to be. And I think they will have much more career security.
That's for sure. Like if you're putting all your eggs in one basket, then that basket shrinks or breaks, and then you're in a bad situation. And the point of career security is that you just need to think about not just for today and the next year, but for the next 5 years and 10 years. Like, how will this experience of working at this company in this function, doing this thing, prepare me for my next job or the next stage in my career?
Yeah. So there's like, okay, I'm gonna, because I was gonna say there's two other things. One is don't be an asshole and learn to work with people and collaboration. Going back to our previous point, so I'll just
Yeah.
say that. And you like when we talk about new technologies, it is also going back to a previous point, also about AI. But this one is really important. What you said, you have to think strategically about your career, and at different stages of your career, you're going to optimize for different things.
Mm.
Earlier on in your career, I think you should optimize for a wide variety of diverse experiences.
Mm.
And if you think about a graph of going up in your career, sometimes those steps are you don't optimize for just salary, optimize for the experience it's going to give. Now, maybe at times that's like, or it used to be, try and get a job at Google because people then live off their Google career.
Yeah.
Like optimize for the experience that in your career. Go for like know where you want to go. You definitely need to say these are the things my ideal job is going to be, but then optimize for a diverse range of experiences that take you upwards towards that. You can maybe in other stages focus more on the monetization and the promotion. I think the early stage you definitely optimize much more for a wide range. So that's an important part of it. I don't know if you want to add anything more on that, but I have another
No, I agree. I would say that it's definitely good advice for people starting out to widen their reach, because also they don't know what's going to capture their interest and what they're going to feel passionate about. Maybe somebody's going to do microcontroller programming, as that's a call for them. And also, I think to extend to this analogy, one thing that should stay within your career is the willingness to learn and live with change, because you're not going to do the same job as you do today in 5 years or 2 years. A lot of the other talks in Craft Conference were about this.
I know it fits really well with the theme. And the last thing I would add is build a platform for yourself, whether that is through kind of contributions in open source to projects, passion projects, or whatever. If you feel comfortable, or learn to write. I think writing is just a skill that's not going to go away. Try and like write a crappy blog, make it a habit. Whatever, if there's some kind of social network, try and add some value in there, even if it's just occasionally commenting on other people's stuff. But be a little bit more out there. Be known. Don't just be anonymous. Some of the best people that I've worked with are some of the most like anonymous people in the industry. And I know people who like did game-changing developments on things like passkeys and Dashlane, who understand the spec of all of that super well, but just feel comfortable being necessarily out there. And I think that you have to get over that a little bit. I think you help yourself, you help your company, you help everyone if you can find ways to be a little bit more out there, even if it's co-authoring. Find someone else and co-author a post about what you've done or how you've done it or whatever it is. But tell the story a little bit more if you can outside of your company, and look for bits of stuff that you've done in your job that you can ideally open source, that are not, maybe like companies were doing this a lot. I think they seem to be stepping back a little bit from it, but there's still opportunities to try and find ways to just open source the work you've done. If it's non-different, if it's kind of like undifferentiated heavy lifting, but it scratched an itch of something that your company had to do with the type of infrastructure or whatever, or library in the app that you were doing, find a way to make it open source. So just look for building a platform for yourself and external data points of what you've done, your contributions.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you're saying is ties well to another talk that was good from Irina Stanescu. She was talking about beyond coding, IC leadership is here to stay. That was the name of her talk, and this is what was the gist of her talk: is that work on your soft skills, because first of all, they can make you much more successful in your current job, but second, they translate really well between different technical aspects and everything. Even if you never go to a managerial path, these soft skills, people skills, learning to drive results, big picture thinking, the whole ownership attitude, leading by example, and influencing others, when you practice these skills, and she was giving some very good tips on this, and detailed beyond these bullet points, then it really helps your career in the long term.
Yeah. I think so. So
Yeah.
I'm tapped out of stuff to say on this, but
No, plus we were going again way over time. So but this is maybe if maybe we can summarize. One of the points is that what's happening now feels radical, but it's actually something that goes
it's
back
normal.
to normal. And the second thing
companies
is that,
not making money, but having more money thrown at them. That's not normal.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. $1 billion valuations for an idea that's not proven. That's not normal. And the second thing is focus on your career security, be a bit more generalist, never stop learning. This sounds like a cliche, but this is really that can give you a sustainable career in this industry.
Yeah, and then strategically think about the jobs you take and how they take you to where you want to be. And
understand the business.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Anything else about me, or we can move on to your stuff?
No, I think we can move on. But this is really great.
Yeah, thank you.
That's why you should go to conferences.
Yeah, exactly. Because people saying that the hallway track and networking and everything, and I totally agree with that. And that was one of my goals, and I spectacularly failed in that. I don't think I made any new connections during these 2 days, maybe just small ones. But I got really inspired by a lot of talks, and I can't wait till finally they put up the recordings of the talks, and I hope I can share them in some ways. I'm not sure, but it's very inspiring. It's like a recharge that can last for weeks or months, and gives me ideas and motivation.
Yeah.
Let's move on to your newsletter. You were continuing the innovation series that you started last week, the mini series, and maybe you can this week's article about framework for innovation.
Yeah. So last week I talked about basically working small and kind of use an analogy, but essentially testing small ideas and hypotheses, iterating fast is kind of like a hill climbing algorithm.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to introduce this week is this kind of the Mobius loop and also the foundation layer, because I think what organizations lack is a structure of how they work, and a way of codifying all the and actually providing kind of, I don't know how to describe this, providing a kind of almost semi-prescriptive way that we work here in a company. And so what I often see is we're doing Scrum, or we're doing Scrumban, or we're doing, like, maybe in bigger companies, it's like we're doing like some other random, very waterfall thing, or they're doing, there's what's the other one that everyone makes jokes of in a way, and trolls. Struggling with
Which one isn't that? Like, I was thinking you're describing Scrum, but
no, well, it's just, I don't know. Scrum. People just say Scrum works for teams, but doesn't work at with it scaled agile or whatever it is called. Anyway, my brain has gone blank today.
We'll put it to the post notes.
In every episode. Yeah, exactly. In every episode, I have a blanking moment. This is it. But what I wanted to introduce was this concept of Mobius. Mobius is coming from the Mobius strip, which is a mathematical thing where you have a continuous surface. And actually, Peter, if you scroll down, there's a picture of it in a little bit further down. And Gabriel Benefield came up with this idea, which I really like, of taking the Mobius strip and actually having a loop, which, if we go back up, is this kind of focusing on the one side on discovery, and on the other side on delivery. And Scrum really focuses very much on that delivery loop on the right hand side, which is just kind of going round and round and round and building something. But what I like about what she's introduced is this concept of going into the why, and really going into, what are we trying to do? What are the outcomes we're trying to have? And then going into this options pivot where you decide, are we going to, how are we going to test that, and what are we going to inject into this delivery loop? We go around the delivery loop, and then what's really important is you go in the delivery loop, you decide, do we need to keep going around the delivery loop to kind of build a bit more here, or do we need to kick back into the discovery and the options and discovery before we go around again? I think it's a really great construct for teams to think about, because most of the time engineering teams tend to live in the delivery loop, and I think, like caricaturing, but product teams product managers and designers and so on tend to focus more on the other two sides a bit more. And I think actually as a team we need to collectively go around this loop together. And what I was showing here is that this Mobius is fantastic, and the Mobius loop, and highly recommend looking into it more. But if you scroll down a bit more, what we discovered was we like in the Open Innovation Labs, and if you keep going down a little bit more, we found that really great. And we wanted to build a practice library of practices that map to different areas of this loop. And what we ended up discovering is, as we started to collect the practices that we were using, we found some practices that didn't fit in discovery or options or delivery, and yet they were really important and valid. And we actually came up with this foundation, which is, and if you scroll down to it, you can get a bit more of an explanation of it. But foundation is both technical practices, like continuous delivery, and collaboration practices, like having a social contract that teams need to have in place in order to be able to make the loop, go around the loop well and fast together. And what I explained is that I think this is a great framework and structure for teams to adopt. And I provided an example of this. If you go to the Open Practice Library, you'll see that there's loads of practice. In fact, too many and really inaccessible. So I've taken a downstream version of it myself that I've curated. I'm still in the process of curating, but essentially I've taken a subset of the practices and put them in here. And then my thing here is, this is a great framework to think about innovation and how to, like, because we said previously last week, sorry, I'm rambling a lot, but process is more important than genius. This is a great way to sort of codify your process and tying it all together. Then what I'm suggesting is that in organizations, we actually try and codify this a little bit. It's the number one thing that's missing is you end up with kind of very artisanal processes when it comes to discovery and deciding on options and so on. And I would highly recommend that this is more for leaders, but even in a team, start to build some standard practices that you use in the team for these different loops, and don't get stuck in just the delivery loop. Because then, if you're stuck in the delivery loop, the team are going to say, oh, we're in a feature factory and so on and so forth. But I would really strongly say that it's helpful to provide some prescriptive processes of how we do kickoffs. Kickoffs is number one thing, that a great place to start. Just build some methodologies, take some practices from here, from the Open Practice Library. Just take some of these, string them together, and use them in your kickoffs, and maybe change some over time so that you figure out what works for you in your context for your team. But have a clear set of practices that you use, that the team are familiar with using, that you can really level up. And my argument for this is that you have people doing a great job in the teams, but not every team is doing that. Not everyone is doing that. So by introducing some standard practices that people can build a base off, that they can change and use themselves, you actually level up the whole organization. And I think you can encourage a stronger innovation across the whole team like that.
And it really helps onboarding also, the other aspect that I was thinking, that if someone new in the organization, it's the pickup of speed is much faster if you have these processes codified. And I really like the organization of the different phases of the Möbius loop. So I was, while you were explaining, I just checked the discovery thing, and it can be even useful if a struggling team, an EM or PM, is trying to find out ways to help the discovery phase, because they like, let's step back. What are we doing here? What we try to do is we're going through this loop, And once it's working well, we're trying to go faster and faster, shortening the loop to
Exactly.
get feedback faster. And
Yeah.
if you have these metrics and you can see it, they don't need to be quantitative. You can even have qualitative. You can feel on a retro that discovery is lagging. Then you can check this library, your companies, or even an open library like Jeremy's, and you can pick up like, okay, say, oh, maybe we need to, I don't know, introduce this lightning decision gem because this might solve some of the problems we have on the discovery side of the loop. That's
Yeah, and there's some really great ones in there. Designers or researchers can use to involve the team in the solutioning, or product manager can use to involve the team, and that's an important part of this. By the way, it's not that, my view is that it's not that the engineers live on the right side of this loop, and
no, that's not what I meant to say.
Because some people, like, I end up operating like that, and you have like a two-speed.
And this is where handover happens, and then a very well documented handover process.
Product manager is writing the spec in
this
there.
Is the definition of ready, and then we can refuse to work on this if not all the 20 checkboxes are checked.
Exactly. We want actually to go around this as much as we can
together
in a team, or at least a cross-functional group within the team that's working on an area. I think, like, one thing that I really want to emphasize here is that this framework, the Open Practice Library, the Mobius with the foundation, works no matter almost any kind of however you work. If you're doing Kanban, I think this can work. If you're doing waterfall, this works. It works with Lean. It works with pretty much any framework. And waterfall is just one time round, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to double down on. Like, I really like that you're very inclusive. You can tell me an example how, like, waterfall is relevant and how it can be.
I think waterfall. I think, like, it's just sometimes where you're in a scenario where that you have to go around a bigger loop. Is it to do with hardware? Is it certain kind? I mean, we should probably get Benoit on talking about how they can iterate on. In Luni we had a guest, Benoit, the CPTO of Luni, and they have a hardware component to their product, and I think it's harder to iterate now. It's really interesting because I read an article about Oxide Computer, who are building these amazing kind of racks of computers that are like cloud, like what cloud providers provide, like Google and build themselves. They're building a version of that you can buy if you hit a particular scale, and they found a way to iterate really fast with hardware. So there's a great article about that. So I think there's still obviously a way, but sometimes you still have to go a little bit. You're limited at some parts of your system, maybe can only go around a certain speed of it, but it applies. And the main point is that this is not opinionated about how you work, but it is a great way to frame the practices that you use in your organization around this loop, and express how we work here. And frankly, I think that's like really missing. People end up just relying on a video on YouTube or a blog post or a talk that they saw about a particular thing. They introduce it in their team. It's not used anywhere else in the organization. You might have some common documents, one-pagers, and so on, but the practices to get there are really missing. And I think that's a massive gap in most organizations. I've never seen it like somewhere having a consistent approach apart from what we built in the Open Innovation Labs,
It's, I mean, I want to talk a bit about the introduction after, ask some questions, but the mention of waterfall brought me a memory about the Craft conference and Gergeros's talk, and I checked my notes quickly, and I remembered well that he was saying that he reached out to Kent Beck, the very famous engineer, I would say leader, not a manager for sure, and asked, okay, what patterns do you see, Ken, that are coming back from all times, from the 2008 2010 times? And one of the things he was saying, interestingly, that waterfall is coming back. Companies have less needs to innovate. They we're in a war mode. We just need to double down on bringing business results. Some companies just need to do what they can do well and not try to figure out something new. The big difference is that waterfall used to mean, I don't know, 2 years. Now it's 2 months. Like the loop is much shorter in a modern waterfall, I would say.
Yeah, because you can just ship stuff a little bit faster. But I've seen that. One of the things I've heard repeatedly when talking to CEOs or CTOs is, we know what we need to do. We need to be in execution mode, and we just need to ship consistently these things and get them out
it's
the door.
dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, my view is that even where you have some level of clarity on that, the more you can do of the discovery and looping around in the building of that execution mode, we talk about, I should probably write about this, but the cone of uncertainty of at the beginning, you don't know actually where exactly the target, where the target kind of is, but you need to de-risk your project over time. And I think the more you do that faster on the loop, the faster you get out of the cone of uncertainty, and you land into something that that's what the user wants, and that's going to make a difference. And or you might discover that there's a way very tactically to do it, achieve the outcome, which is the really important thing. What are you trying to achieve? Is it build a feature? No, it's not. Even in that we know what we need to do, we need to land the US market, and the US market has these requirements for us to be able to penetrate the US market, or whatever it is. And the outcome is that US customers buy your product. And so is it that you really need these features? So focusing on outcomes is a key part of this Mobius loop as well.
Yeah. Okay. Last question on this is about, I like the idea of companies explicitly documenting their processes and using this Mobius loop and the stages as a structure to do that. When do you think it's ideal for a company to do that? Because I would say that if you're starting from zero or a not super well organized, not super healthy organization, then that's not the first thing that I would look at. I would look at working on foundations, principles, documenting those. Can you just give some ideas, like when do you think is the right time to focus on this?
So I think that the way I would work a little bit is, what you're describing there, I would be looking at introducing some of these practices, without like having a whole library and everything else. I would just do we, whatever the diagnosis of the current problem is, but maybe we don't have like quite the right status and things are not really like working. So maybe you need to introduce 15.5s and have like a way to just have like a roll up every week of what's going on in the org. And there's different approaches for that, and but maybe that's the one. Or maybe we just actually, the meetings that we have with my staff meeting or my team meeting aren't working very well. Maybe I introduce lean coffee, super simple stuff. Or and really foundational one, we actually struggle together to collaborate in a team. I would say introduce the social contract, change a little bit the format of some of the team meetings, maybe, just like pick bits and pieces. But I think that over time, you may find that we actually now start to have some standard practices, and then it's worthwhile to kind of maybe document. You don't need to do too much. You can literally have a wiki page with this on it, and just to have like links, and you linked out to the open practice library. And if you come up with a new one, recommend that you add it to the open practice library and then just link to that, because then you're participating in open source and whatever.
Yeah, tying back to the previous advice. Yeah,
exactly. And then the other thing I would say, like if you want to string some of these together, I think the biggest opportunity I've seen in almost everywhere I've worked is in kickoffs, because kickoffs are where projects or features go wrong or they go right. And I think that's where we have the least like we usually have something for execution and building in that delivery loop. But what we're missing often is, well, what is the format? Do we do like a 1 week design sprint type thing at the beginning of every new feature? who do we include and how do we do that. And I recommend that's a great place to start. And as a leader also, I think it's usually where you can see where things go off the rails, and and getting agreement in as early as possible, both with understanding the user and what the outcome is we're trying to do, and also having leadership buy-in. The earlier you can put that all in and string it into a set of practices, the better. So I think that's a good place to actually have a number of consecutive practices together.
Yeah, I would add one more thing. I like this focusing on the small problems that you diagnosed and solving them with this one by one. I think it can be valuable to introduce the whole concept of the loop and these 3 stages and how you're getting back to it, the options you have, shortening it, the foundation. So it can help people structurize their thoughts when they think about a process and understand better that this is a delivery process. This is a discovery process that we are documenting.
You're right. And I remember in the Open Innovation Labs, it's something when we did training and when we onboarded people into how we work, it's something that we introduced really early on. We didn't do it in discovery, if I remember. We didn't really do it in discovery workshops and kind of, but anytime where we were, like in pretty much early on in the first day or whatever. And then what we ended up doing was we ended up having like a board in the training. And we started, as we introduced them to new practices, we started putting the practices up in the parts of the loop. And then they started to understand how they all connected together and so on. So we should get probably a guest in at some point to talk about this a bit more.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, I have someone in mind. It
I
would be
really
really interesting.
Guest format, so
yeah, I think so. But
nice.
This is super powerful. So that's it. That's what I wanted to share this week.
And you did a good job with last week's and this week's. They connected nice.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah. But do you think you're going to continue this week?
I'm scratching my head a little bit. I have some ideas. I was thinking about maybe doing like explaining a prescriptive kind of approach for a kickoff around this. It's one of the ideas I have. So we'll see. I like to let sit with stuff for a little bit, and then it just kind of comes out of me.
Yeah, same. I just have, in my Friday newsletter, I have a section of what I want to do next week, because I actually liked it from the 15/5s that it helps me. Actually, that's the moment when I step back a bit and say, okay, where am I going with all this stuff that I'm working on? How does it get me closer to my long-term goals? And that's that little thinking, even if it's just 15 minutes, 10 minutes, it's very valuable in ensuring that I'm on the right track. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to do. Now it's easy because I'm in the middle of a series about getting hired as an engineering manager. So
you know what you're going to do.
Interviewing one. But yeah, sometimes it's hard to choose a topic.
Yeah. I'm kind of have a theme inside of me that's slowly popping out in different bits and pieces. So it kind of makes sense to me, at least. Sometimes I bounce around a little bit within that, but it's why in some ways I've focused a lot on kind of theoretical stuff, foundational stuff, intro stuff, and I want to get more to like actionable nitty gritty stuff over time. But
and something interesting that I learned from my daughter, actually. She's 13, and it's cool. They teach kids how to learn, which is awesome, I think. And I don't think I ever had that in school. And she said about this technique, I don't remember the name of it, that our brain processes stuff even when we don't actively think about it. The phenomena that you just have a solution at I don't know, under the shower or something. And you can actively work on that. Like, you familiarize yourself with a problem, try to find a solution, you get stuck, you move on to something else, it's fine. And then you will just, your brain is going to work on it in the background. And how I connect it is I think it's the same feeling. Like, we have a lot of topics going on in our heads that are in various shapes and readiness, but we don't need to feel too bad about not focusing on one and finishing and taking the next, but running in this parallel ambiguity for a while, because our brains are still in the background working out the details of those articles in progress.
Yeah. Oh, this has been awesome, Peter.
Yes, I really enjoyed it. I
yeah.
think I don't want to fall into, I don't know, fake modesty. So I think we are improving on this.
I just enjoyed the
shows.
conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
We did for those listeners who listen, we did tweak the format because we tried to explain our blog post a little bit more before we go into the topic. I think it worked, but
I think
feedback
it did
welcome.
because in previous, like, let's do a retrospective. In previous shows, it felt a bit weird asking
Yeah.
you and like really jumping in the middle of it. Okay, so you wrote about this topic. What
Yeah.
do you think about this more detail? And
Yeah.
even for us who are very familiar with the material, it was a bit weird. I can only imagine how weird it must have felt for someone
Exactly.
who didn't read the articles or read it a long time ago. So yeah, I like this format. I think we're going to keep
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Brilliant. Well,
Yeah.
please do give us feedback.
Yeah.
And we're on everywhere, kind of on social or whatever. But I really hope that folks have a great week.